the thing that I say is nothing is a waste if a lesson was learned. Nothing. I really truly believe that. I don't care if you had a feature launch go miserably wrong because you're going to learn from that. I don't care if you delete tags or conversations that link to other sales flows because you're going to learn from that. I'm very, very heavy on that aspect because, like I said, people are the hardest on themselves. And we can often just reflect, be like, well, what if I did this differently? What if I did this one thing with, this approach versus this approach? And at the end of the day, something that's really helped ease my mind and something I coach others on is if you learn something, you're fine.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Software Engineering Tales. Today, we are covering story of one unconventional journey into product management role, and I'm very glad that I could talk with Santiana Brace, who is now experienced product manager, but she started actually in retail, and it's really interesting story. So we cover a lot about her journey, about the PM role, and also quite a lot about juggling, demanding software engineering job with small kids and family life. So stay tuned and let's get to it.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me on. I was really excited when you asked. So I appreciate it.
I had quite recently another product manager on the show, so I'm happy that I can compare maybe later a little bit your experience with hers. So first thing I would like to know is how goes your typical day? A lot of meetings?
Almost like you talked to another PM before. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to share more about my typical day. So yes, there are usually quite a few meetings that we go into, just and depending on what it is, it might be kind of like recurring meetings. Some of them might be a little more ad hoc as we kind of flesh out certain details on things we're working on and initiatives. And sometimes it's just quick little like, hey, let's do a level set, everything sound good? Quick 3-4 minute huddle, and we're good to go. But for a typical day, for me in my role, it really does just kind of come down to, um, it's a mix of the little like execution pieces that we need to do. There might be like need to add a document for something, or we're gonna document a workflow, anything like that, or we're gonna document kind of just some higher level things. But then it does involve the coming back out and doing the big picture thinking on some things as well. So no 2 days are the same. I will just preface by saying that. I know it's a little ambiguous. So it's like, yeah, like small stuff and big stuff, but it's because there's so much variety in this role. Like my day to day is going to look a lot like, working through some of the strategy planning stuff that we've been doing for 2025. We had a really great in office session with the product team this week for most of the week. So my day today will be, kind of digging into some of those problems we're looking to solve, seeing how they tie back into our bigger objectives, and just collaborating with my product team to see where we're going, and kind of what we can start moving the needle on. So that being said, when people ask, what's your day to day look like, some days and some weeks are a little more consistent, some not so much.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to your work, what do you say is the toughest part, or maybe the part that you are not enjoying so much?
When it comes to the product manager role, so
Yeah.
one thing, and again, product will look different depending on the company you're with, the team you're in, the organization, the industry, a lot of factors. But one thing that product managers, myself included, can sometimes get sucked into is like really like weedy kind of details. And sometimes it's like weedy details that we don't need to be in. And then we don't really realize that until we take that step back and look at the bigger picture of like the actual problem space we're in and like what we're trying to solve for. And then we realize, oh, okay, I've just spent an hour trying to think through this one thing, but in the grand scheme of what we're trying to do, it that isn't going to, really move the needle in the way that I, could be thinking about some other things. So, the weeding things, some, and again, prefacing, sometimes it is necessary to dig into those, but constantly being in those is a little bit of a not loving it. And it's also, challenging ourselves, like, where is our best, where's our time being best used? So that would be my answer. It's
Yeah.
just kind of those more like really, 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 really small, small things that just don't really move the needle, but are easy to get sucked into.
Yeah. So one thing that I find like difficult across multiple roles is getting the requirements for the thing that we are building right, because there can be a lot of like communication, issues and mistakes when you try to understand what you are trying to build and what your customer actually needs
Right.
and where is the value, right?
Right.
So do you have some tricks and tips how to smooth this issue down?
Oh, this is a really good question. So in again, the risk of sounding repetitive, how I did this in my last company is quite different than how I do it now. So in my last company, because it was a smaller startup, I just worked really, really, really closely with our engineers and we just did a lot of knowledge share across the team as much as possible. And we had more of that flexibility because we, a little smaller, able to kind of move through the different departments a little bit easier. In my current role, in terms of getting kind of the requirements, we're actually revisiting our work styles and how we do that now, in terms of just enhancing that collaboration, because ultimately that's the key to this, is that it's
Yeah.
heavy on the collaboration piece. And people here talk about like the triad and stuff, obviously, like design, engineering, and product. So what we're looking to do now is just really harness the power of collaboration on that front, and just digging into things as that triad. So everyone has obviously their expertise and their skill that they're coming in with. So for the product team, we're really looking at focusing on that problem space. What are the problems we're trying to solve? What are the main things in that bucket that we want to solve for our customers? That of course also ties into the business goals that we have. And once we get really clear about that, we're looking to have the other stakeholders and colleagues kind of come in and really get to know that problem and get to know what we're trying to solve for. Once we have that, then and so I don't have like a definitive like tip and trick right now, because we're going through this exercise live as we speak. But what my advice basically would be is just to give space for that. Like, get to know that problem, give space to let it marinate a little bit, and then get the others involved in it, talk about it, hear the different points of views, see kind of like how this all can kind of roll up into the thing that you want to solve for and how you could be solving for it. One thing that I had to learn, because when at my last company I was a kind of a solo PM, um, it felt very much like I had to know everything, have the answers for everything, and be able just to go at all times. But taking that kind of and this is why I'm actually having such a fun time here, because I have more of a team that I can, brainstorm with and lean on and share ideas with. And so taking that step back and kind of letting the collaboration start flowing in and doing that problem solving together, it's just a beautiful, beautiful feeling. Totally recommend it. So just that would be my thing. Just keep the communication up, keep the collaboration sessions open, and just keep challenging ourselves and asking those questions. I've had to ask myself a few hard questions this week, just to be like, is this right though? Like, here's what I'm thinking. Let's challenge it and just create room for everyone to have that. And I've seen some really great things come of it.
That's cool. So how long ago did you switch the companies?
So I
How,
joined my most recent company earlier this year in March. So I think about, if I'm doing my math right, just about 8 months.
yeah, yeah. So what I want to ask is basically, recently, as I mentioned, I had on podcast Lindsay Clapping, who is like head of product management in our
Right.
company in Freepiller. And one thing that stood out was she claimed that there is a lot of less patience in the system today. And as a fresh new, PM, uh, when you start, you have much less time to prove yourself. So basically, she said like, if in the past it was like 90 days to come up with some plan and get into the pace. Now it's down to 30. So what was your experience?
That's a really good question as well, and that's an interesting kind of point of view there. Not that I disagree, but for me, my journey into product was so non-linear that
Yeah.
it it almost was like a living process for me. Like, instead of having like the 30, 60, 90 kind of day, it was because I was with my company for quite a while, and I had done many different roles and excelled kind of in those roles. It was more of just like a living process going through into product. So I think mine would be a little bit different, um, in terms of kind of that style of like, okay, you got to prove yourself within like the first 30, 60, 90 days. So for that one, basically, yeah, that's a really good question. My thoughts on that would just be, kind of sticking to the curiosity and the nature of, the PM role, right? Where that comes kind of at a core. So it's obviously a lot harder to do it in a shorter time, but basically, just as soon as you get into kind of that role, let's say you're like an associate product manager and you're jumping into that role for the first time at a company, just in something I did is just really just start digging into your, obviously, like your business, your customers, your platform, like asking those questions, continue to learn, and then continue to just work on showing your learnings, the things that you're doing, and how they're rolling up into some of these other initiatives. I know, and you're going to be brand new, and that's the other thing too. I would also hope that those companies would give, some of that grace to allow kind of that newer APM or the newer product manager to kind of get their feet in the door, but just continuing to learn, be curious, ask questions, reflect, be thoughtful, and continue to just do the execution that you can within the bandwidth. The things I always do remind people as well, is just also give yourself some grace, because when we get into a new role, it's very stressful. You are trying to prove yourself. You're trying to show that, like, yeah, this was a good hire, essentially. So,
Yeah.
but always remember that you will always do the best that you can with what you have at the time, and just give yourself a little bit of that grace as you do move through that. You're going to learn, you're going to grow. It's going to look different for every journey that you're on, with every team, company, position, but just have that grace and just continue to provide the value that you can at each step of the way, and just keep iterating. That's product, right? It works
Yeah.
it's product management at its core. It's also an approach I like to take for myself. I almost am like a product in my own way. So continuing to
Yeah.
grow and iterate on that.
Yeah. Let's get back to the beginning of your PM journey, basically, because I know that, you have a bit different background, or you had different career before that. So could you elaborate on how you got into your first PM role?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. It's so funny because I look back and I'm just like, wow, that was quite a journey. There's no way around it. So basically, I'll go to like the very, very beginning of like professional career journey. I graduated high school, had a lot of hopes and dreams, and thought to myself, I'm going to take a year though, because I was going to be going to university, hopefully to do a degree in chemistry. And I thought, let me just take a year. Where I love chemistry, but I wanted to take the year and just kind of, you know, not have to do school for a year, basically. 18-year-old, you want to take a little break. So I had done that, and what I had realized by the time that it rolled around for me to actually start attending school, my heart just was not fully in it, and I knew in my core, and this is about that kind of those tough conversations about challenging ourselves, our assumptions, and what we think we know. I had to do that with myself in this scenario. So I had to say, is this actually what I want? And my gut was telling me no. And I was like, interesting. So I decided not to actually pursue post secondary education. And instead, I started working in retail. And I did retail management for a few years. And it was a friend of mine, actually, who she reached out, and she's a software engineer. So she was doing her co op at a local startup that we were near in the area, and she said, we're hiring kind of the first of its kind role for a customer support coordinator, and you have a lot of obviously customer service experience and management. You should absolutely apply. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, that's so nice of her to ask me. And then the other side of me was like, I have zero tech experience. So
Yeah.
I was a little bit torn at the time because you're going from, an established role. You have, the ins and outs. You're considered kind of like an expert in what you do. I was on a management track to be leading my own store in it could have potentially been multiple, who knows? And so I thought to myself, like, is this kind of a jump that I want to take? And I praying about it, and I was thinking about it, and I was doing all kinds of things. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I knew in my heart, again, challenging myself, I knew in my heart that I didn't want to do the retail path forever. So I made the jump, and I gratefully was able to have that role. And so the point that I was talking about being curious, diving in, executing on what you can, and just working to provide value, that's essentially what I did as soon as I landed in that role as a customer support coordinator. I just dove in. I went neck deep into everything, just kind of ran with it and learned. I grew, and eventually I started moving through some different positions. So it went from the customer support coordinator into the customer experience lead role. That is when I started working more closely with engineers, and I actually really liked that. So I would attend their backlog groomings. I would do kind of like voice of customer stuff, and would just continue to help shape the product in some of that feedback way, like some of those feedback loops, but also continuing to support our customers on the front line. And then it was one day when I had, he was a really great manager. He was our QA manager. And he came to me and he was like, you should really consider joining QA. I was like, for some reason, I just found bugs. I don't know if it was because they liked me and they were just like, hey, but I just found
Yeah.
them. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, again, had another self conversation with myself to be like, is this kind of a path that I'm thinking? And I knew in my heart product had always stood out to me, which is why I was so stoked to be in those backlog reviewing meetings. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to do it. And I did do QA for a year. And I, again, just knowing that product was kind of at my core, I asked the director of product at the company, and I was like, I am interested. And my team was very, very amazing and helping me kind of, transition into that role and continue to develop my skills and just do that. So that's why I say mine is a little bit different than like a brand new APM in a role, because like for those junior roles, because I had kind of set my reputation already through the years of me doing support and
Yeah.
quality assurance. So I was grateful for that. And eventually I had done like an online kind of specialization for product management, was like the tipping point for me to get into product. And then I jumped in as the associate product manager. Did some more of the kind of those entry level product things. You're doing some documentation, you're doing some like ticket mapping and stuff like that. And I actually helped roll out the regression test suite for our QA team. So using some of those cross discipline skills and just
Yeah.
continuing to learn, soak everything up, ask questions, observe. I would watch our director and how she kind of managed, how she did product, like the conversations she was having, the way that she kind of her train of thought when she was making decisions. I would kind of test myself. I would go in and be like, okay, we have this situation happening. Here's what I think should be the path. Can you keep me honest? And I would just kind of see if I was on the right path. And I just continued to do that until eventually I was actually the only PM at that company. And that's how I transitioned into product and how I continued to grow in product in that capacity.
Yeah. It was a lot of communication. So
Yes.
I'm wondering, do you sometimes have to communicate with person where you feel that you are not on the same wavelength and it's tough?
So yeah, like you do get that pretty much anywhere, right? I would say that that's not really a unique thing to any one particular kind of company model, anything like that. Just
Yeah.
everyone's different. Everyone has their own vibe, their own personalities, things they like to do. So if I'm working, so I'll just do kind of like a hypothetical, like if I'm in a situation where I'm working with someone, we're not on the same wavelength. One of the things that I like to do in those situations is really just bring it back to the common goal we're trying to achieve, because everyone has this, they want the same thing in the end. They want a success, whether it's a success metric to be improved, whether it's something to be, everyone wants the same thing. They have the same goal. We just can have different ways we think of how we can get there. So one of the things I like to do is bring it back to the very beginning. Like, what are we trying to do here? What is the actual goal of XYZ initiative? And then I try to just really, and part of being a PM too, those collaboration skills are crucial. Empathy as well is very, very much a crucial skill set. So I try to think, okay, let's all get back to what we know, and let me hear everyone out. Let me see their point of views. Let me consider it, and I am very intentional about putting myself into their shoes to see their point of view. Once I feel like I have a good understanding of kind of where everyone's coming from, like what the concerns are, what the opportunities are, pros and cons, then I like to rally everyone kind of back in and be like, okay, so we know that this is true, this is true, this is true. And then I will suggest an idea that I can kind of amalgamate from all of that and be like, all right, so here's what I think could be a good path forward, keeping in mind those kind of pieces from the conversation, and then we kind of discuss and see, like, is this a path that we're comfortable with. Sometimes it means taking it back a step and just going a smaller step forward, but still a step forward. And I kind of get the feedback from the room, and I work to just keep that path forward. But like, it really does come down to just being collaborative, also compromising, right? Like, sometimes we all have to compromise in some ways. Like, I might want, this really amazing, like, part of a feature to go out, but realizing that there could be a lot of technical elements to that might prolong the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do. So I might have to compromise a little bit to be like, okay, so if we can't get this out kind of in the timely manner that we would like to, can we maybe get this smaller other valuable thing in there instead? And we work back and forth. It really is
Yeah.
just you're gonna have to edit out some of the collaborations I've said in this one, but it really is just like working together, trying to understand each other, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. I also can't stress that one enough. Give the benefit of the doubt to the person that you're working with or the team you're working with, because ultimately you guys all have the same goal. And sometimes it can be hard to forget that when you're kind of in the middle of a more complex scenario, or you're working through kind of like a tense situation, like a tense problem that's like has a lot of moving pieces. You all have the same goal in mind, though. You all want to see this win, and you're all coming from a good place. And I try to keep that in mind because it really does help paint the picture of what we're trying to do as a team.
Yeah. So I think you get to use a lot of skills that you picked up along your career,
Yeah.
like being a leader, right?
Right.
So you have right now your own team, or you are a part of team?
Yeah, so I'm a part of the product team here. So I'm just an IC with individual contributor for right now, and I say
Yeah.
just, it's not just, but that's my role
Yeah.
currently. And I find too with product, what's really nice about this, and something I'm like, learning as I go, like, there are different ways that you can be a leader within that. And that's really any role, to be fair, but especially in product,
Yeah.
there's different ways you can be a leader in the role you are without the leader title. So for example, I am kind of helping our team roll out a new tool into our tech stack. And I've kind of taken the lead on that. And it's been really great because it's something that I love to do. I do love to lead on certain like initiatives. I love to lead with certain projects, but I also know that I have a really great team that I can lean into, and utilizing our strengths, skills, and all of that to get that, whatever that goal is, to the finish line. I explained this to my manager once. I see like our teams and companies and kind of what we're trying to do almost like a game, right? Like a sports game.
Yeah.
I see like kind of like football, really. I don't know much about football, so no one quote me on this here, but I see different positions trying to get that ball to the end, right? So I know that I might be able to get the ball a certain way up by myself, and I that's where my skills shine, and that's where I can go. And then I know, and I'm humble enough to know there's someone else who's going to be able to get a little bit further than me. I might kind of come back around and keep going. Someone else might pop in, grab the ball, and run. It really is a team sport on that front. So I've done the solo PM stuff where you it's just you and the ball, but I've also been working in this team capacity where we all kind of have our strengths and weaknesses. We all lead in different ways, and it's been really really nice to see that unfold and how we're moving the needle on initiatives.
Yeah. I know that you are also in other important role, because I know that you have a small kid.
Yes.
And I'm just curious how you manage to keep all things together and to juggle demanding job and taking care of your family and all sorts of this stuff.
Yeah, that's a really, of course, it's a really good question. There's some phenomenal folks on LinkedIn that talk about this as well that I'd be happy to recommend. But for me personally, it really is just, I say this a lot in my team when we're trying to think about like what are we going to work on next. Ruthless prioritization is the thing that I say a lot. They're probably sick of me, but it applies to so many areas, not just in work, but in life. So for me, I love my job, I love my team, I love what we do, but I know that when kind of my end of day comes, I need to be present for my family, for my son. You know, he's young. He is learning every single day. He needs his mother, right? So I'm also very blessed to have a team that is heavy on the work-life balance aspect. They are very much supportive of that. They acknowledge it. A lot of us have young children, or just children in general, even the teenage years, right? You got sports, you got clubs, they want to do
Yeah.
this with their friends, right? There's all kinds, and they are so supportive of that aspect of life, and they know that it is so crucial. And so that's another thing I'm very grateful for. It's part of it is on me to make sure I'm setting boundaries and sticking to my own boundaries. And the other part is having a supportive company that really helps empower you to do that. Very grateful for me that I have that right now. And that's a thing that we have. But I encourage folks also to, if they're struggling to kind of set those boundaries, one thing I did actually when I returned from maternity leave is I removed Slack off my phone. I know,
Yeah.
right? I know, and it's picking up a little
Yeah.
traction. I know it's a little controversial for some people, but I removed Slack from my phone when I came back from maternity leave because I had another, conversation with myself, and I remembered, like, before I went on that leave, I was constantly checking that thing. It was not healthy. It was not healthy. I had to be honest with myself and be like, you know what? I know if it's there, I'm going to continue to check it. So one thing I did to kind of help put the boundary in place is remove Slack from my phone. When my end of day comes, I close my laptop down and that's that. My phone number, obviously my team has my phone number. If some sort of big, scary, hairy problem comes, it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's all and those rarely usually don't happen. So, but so it's not that I'm completely unreachable. Like you can get to me if
Yes.
absolutely needed. But I'm very intentional about I've done, I've done my thing for
But
today. Like
yeah.
I've done my work I do and I love my work. So, but now I know, okay, I need to switch gears into mom mode. And that's kind of just being very intentional about my boundaries is what helps me manage all of this.
Can you imagine managing all this without possibility of remote work?
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, if you can imagine to be able to manage all this without like possibility to work remotely,
Right. See, and that's the
because
thing too. And I know it's not as easy for folks that don't work remotely. That's why I'm very much an advocate for the remote work because it really has changed how we work and it has given so much back. Like for example, when I was pregnant, I worked remotely. So I did not have to kind of worry about, as I was heavily pregnant in the winter. I did not have to worry about, God forbid, like accidents happening. I could be walking to the office.
yeah,
At some point when you're pregnant, if you fall, no matter how the fall, it's a straight trip to the hospital. So, because life as I know it has been built on remote work. Um, it was honestly eye-opening to just see how much we've kind of gotten back from that. And I'm very much an advocate for that. Like if you can do your work remotely and obviously perform like, everything's fine on that front, like why not?
yeah,
Right? Like why not? That's just
yeah,
there are times like I do have an office near me that we go in, every so often we do like we were in there this week to do planning and strategy. And I think that makes total sense. It's nice to have everyone in the room kind of brainstorming, the juices are flowing. But um, for the majority of the time, though, like honestly, it really does. The way I work, it's actually almost better in some ways. I'm not distracted when I'm in an office. I get much more time back with my family than I would be if I was in an office, especially because like I was commuting for at least an hour just one way, right? Like that's
yeah.
just time it's just kind of I don't want to say wasted, it's just not used to its full potential.
You,
That's what I'll say.
you can invest it in a better way.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm just like, one of those things. If I were in the office kind of full time, it would be so much more difficult to manage, especially just with just really in really young kids. Older kids are a little more self-sufficient on that front, but like with like young children, like it does. I've seen it like firsthand how much patience you have to have. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
One question that I ask every guest
Mhm.
on the podcast, and it's a tough one,
Okay.
so prepare. Uh, Tell me about one time that you really messed up and what you learned from
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay. So this I laugh because I'm like I still cringe about it years later, even though it's a different life. But I remember when I was on the customer support team at my last company, and we were we were using intercom at the time, and there was like a way that you could tag conversations in intercom, and they would just they would like group conversations and things like that. And I found out after you could actually like tag these conversations that would group into other workflows and other platforms. I think that's what it was, if I remember. It was years ago, so I may be a little off. But and I remember one day we were looking through, like, oh my gosh, there's so many tags on some of these conversations coming in. Like, let's just clean them up a little bit. It's getting a little cluttery. It's really just we don't really need them. Like we have our tags that we're using. We know what we're doing, and so I was going through, and I was just removing some. I was like, yeah, that's an old one, blah blah blah. And then at one point, I was like, okay, let me do just a little spot test just to see kind of like what's happening once we click on a tag and making sure we're removing the right ones and things like that. And that's when I realized that they do link to other platforms and other workflows and some of the sales flows. And I just sat there for a minute and I was like, wow, do I put my 2 weeks in now or what? Like it was one of those things where I was like, okay, crap, I messed up because I deleted some tags that did play into some of our sales workflows. And so I remember just going to like the stand up, like our CS stand up the next day, being like, I messed up. Like I made an error. And of course the team was very gracious about it. Like, mistakes happen. And just my one like takeaway from that was quite literally like it's just always just do that one little like even if you're 99% sure, I still to this day will just do a quick little just spot test just to make sure. And it was something that I also learned about kind of because I can be so hard on myself for making mistakes. I learned a little bit of self-grace in that one. It's gonna happen. It's quite you always hear the phrase like it's not a matter of if, it's when. It is so true. I learned to be a little more graceful on myself because it is going to happen. So that's when I really started to just looking back in my career, why I talk about it so much on LinkedIn as well, just because it can kill some people inside when they make mistakes. Having grace,
Yeah.
it's gonna be okay. Our app did not fall apart. The computers did not blow up. Like it was fine. Everything was fine in the grand scheme of things. So just remembering that was a good real life lesson for me.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap up. One last thing. So if our audience, our listeners and watchers should take just one thing with them home, what it should be, the most important thing to remember from this.
From this, oh goodness. Wow, yeah, it's a good one. So, one important thing, at least for me, that I continue to, it's been a, kind of the backbone of what I do and my career and the things that in life as well. I take this very seriously. The thing that I say is nothing is a waste if a lesson was learned. Nothing. I really truly believe that. I don't care if you had a feature launch go miserably wrong because you're going to learn from that. I don't care if you delete tags for conversations that link to other sales flows because you're going to learn from that. I'm very heavy on that aspect because, like I said, people are the hardest on themselves. And we can often just reflect, be like, well, what if I did this differently? What if I did this one thing with, this approach versus this approach? And at the end of the day, something that's really helped ease my mind and something I coach others on is if you learned something, you're fine. That was not a waste. That was a learning opportunity. What you do next will be important because it's how you take those learnings, implement them, refine them, and continue to grow. Don't be afraid to make the mistakes again because, again, if you do, you're going to learn and grow. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I've taken away from my career. And through all of this is just there's so many different ways to learn. There's so many scenarios in which we learn. There's so many things that we do. None of it is really wasteful at all because it gives you a skill set in, XYZ buckets or whatever it might be, and you can continue to grow and learn. So I am a huge proponent of that.
It was a great conversation. Thank you again for coming to Software Engineering Tales, and I guess see you around on LinkedIn and everywhere.
Yep, absolutely. You'll see me on the LinkedIn verse. I'm there all the time. I'm always happy to chat with folks. So you know the drill. And thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. I love what you're doing, and you should be so proud of the things that you're working on and getting yourself out there. You're absolutely rocking it. And I will continue to cheer for you.